I'm Lily. I'm 22 years old, and I sent my father to prison. Let me explain what happened. After my mom left to marry her high school sweetheart, Edward, there was just me and my dad. He was the kind of man who made everything feel like it was under control, even when things were crumbling apart. I was his only child, an heir to the fortune that he and my uncle had amassed over the years. He raised me alone, with all the love and care a parent could give a child. My uncle had no children and no wife. He discovered early in life that he was infertile, so I was basically his child as well. Despite the common stereotype that wealthy families are distant, mine was very close, and it was obvious that we loved each other. So you can imagine our surprise when my uncle filed a lawsuit against my father. He accused him of embezzling money from the company, but that had to be a mistake. After the unexpected news, all hell broke loose. My grandmother on my father's side asked for a family meeting to understand what was going on, but my uncle refused to attend. The whole thing was unbelievable. We had just had dinner together after my uncle picked me up from university and took me out for bagels. My father joined us there. After many attempts from my father and other family members to reconcile, my uncle's only reply was, "Dear brother, I'll see you in court." A few days later, my mother arrived, all the way from California. Luckily, she came alone. She wanted me to go with her until this business blew over, but I just smiled and told her that running from your family was her thing, not mine. Her face contorted in pain. Then she nodded and told my dad she'd like to stay for a few days until things became clearer. The court date arrived, and we all, including my mother, went to support my father and try to understand what the heck was going on. At the end of the hearing, I learned three things. 1. My uncle had a lot of evidence against my father. 2. He was heartbroken while my father was angry. 3. And even with the best lawyers, there was a big chance my father would go to jail. After leaving the courtroom, I found my friends waiting outside, and so was Charles. He was a student at the same university as me, originally from the UK. In the last few months, we had become very close, to the point that, before all this started, we had decided to become a couple. He was handsome, kind, and knew how to listen. So, when I found him standing outside the courtroom, waiting for me with a warm expression on his face and 2 cups of coffee in hand, I felt a sense of safety in the middle of chaos. He hugged me tight, whispered, "Whatever happens, I've got you," and I believed him. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. The lawyers couldn't poke enough holes in my uncle's case. My father was growing quieter, thinner, and more agitated. My mother, surprisingly, stayed through it all. We were functioning in survival mode, waiting for the final act. Charles became my rock. He'd sit with me in the library as I tried to focus on schoolwork, took me to all my favorite restaurants, binge-watched Gossip Girl with me, and held me when I spiraled in doubt. I told him how I had looked at some documents before. I used to deliver and bring papers from my father's office to my uncle's, and vice versa. I often helped my father clean his desk before we left his office, and never saw anything out of the ordinary. I was studying business, after all, so both my father and uncle would give me advice or show me things now and then. Nothing ever seemed suspicious, which is why it all made no sense to me. So I decided to take another look at the papers in my father's office. I made Charles promise that whatever we found, it would remain a secret forever. He nodded and promised it would. His expression was nervous. We looked for hours, but found nothing unusual. I mentioned that a file seemed to be missing, but assumed it was with the lawyers. Charles agreed. That night, while we were cuddling in bed, he asked me gently, "Do you remember what that file was about?" And I did, so I told him. He made a mental note, kissed my forehead, and told me how proud he was of how strong I'd been through all of this. That conversation changed everything. I just didn't know it yet. The night before the sentencing, my father sat me down and held my hands. "If I go to jail," he said, "promise me you'll be okay." I did everything I could to protect us. You, especially. His eyes were glassy. "Father, you're not going to jail. We both know that. So stop," I said. "But if I'm wrong, you'll have to live with the truth," he replied. I barely slept that night. And then came the day. The courtroom was colder than usual. I kept looking at my phone because the hearing was about to begin, and Charles was nowhere to be seen. I kept calling and leaving him text messages, but ever since yesterday afternoon, I hadn't heard from him. 2 minutes later, I turned around to find him walking up the aisle, straight to my uncle's legal team. No hesitation, no glance back. He pulled a folder from his briefcase, nodded to one of the lead attorneys, and took a seat beside them like he belonged there. My mouth went dry. "What the hell?" I whispered. My mother noticed it too. "Isn't that your boyfriend?" My heart was racing, pounding in my ears. I couldn't even hear the judge call the session to order. All I could see was Charles, not smiling, not sorry, sitting with them. It all clicked too fast. He was never just a student. He had never been just curious about my family. And all those times we stayed up late trying to find something to help my father, were those really the acts of a loving boyfriend? All the intimate, sweet moments we shared, they were just research. Charles was a junior private investigator, hired by my uncle. He had been investigating my dad long before he met me. It was all a setup. I had given him the final missing piece when I told him about the missing file. The names, the folder structure, everything. The prosecution used it to access hidden accounts. My words, my trust, were the nail in my father's coffin. And now, my father, the man who raised me, protected me, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Charles never looked at me. He didn't have to, because the damage was done. And I, Lily Hartwell, became the unintentional Judas in my own family's story.